Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's show is brought to you by Claude and Steamclock. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm having a great day. I'm excited to talk to you about something that we haven't talked about in quite some time.
Well, this is a classic returning App Stories episode that is not a Pick 2 episode.
No.
But it's another classic. We're going to talk about text editors.
The whole category. Yeah.
The whole thing. I'm sure there's a list in our catalog of almost 500 episodes, which we are approaching with Runestone. I'm pretty sure there's at least a couple, probably more, episodes about text editors. But what's interesting about this, and the reason why I immediately said yes when you came up with the idea, is that this landscape has, in many ways, both stayed the same, but also changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously, part of it is because of AI. The other part, I think, when you look specifically at Apple, is sort of the convergence of iPadOS and macOS. There's been a lot of churn on the App Store, I think also, like many apps from years ago that just no longer exist or are no longer maintained. So sadly, there's a lot of legacy software that we cannot talk about anymore. And then there's also like another topic about like plain text and Markdown and the role of these file formats in the modern era that make this topic very interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think one of the areas that we'll talk about is these kind of scratchpad apps that, we're not going to talk, I think, just about text editors in terms of what you would write an article or an essay or a book in. But, when it comes to text editor, there's a lot of blurry lines between what's a note-taking app, what's kind of like a note-taking app that's meant to be more of a temporary scratchpad, what's meant to be something for books. There's a whole range here, and you're right. I mean, the landscape has changed quite a bit. A lot of things have fallen by the wayside, but there are new things popping up all the time, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. I feel like I specifically, I think of, maybe this is just me, but I think of a text editor. I mean, anything can be a text editor, obviously, as long as you can edit some text. In my mind, the text editor is a Markdown text editor, or at the very least, a plain text editor. Right? So we're not I don't think of Pages as a text editor.
No, I think of that as a word processor. But where would you put Notion then? Because Notion has hallmarks of a word processor.
Yeah, I think it's a word processor I have been. I think it is. I think it's a word processor. I think it's a note-taking app. I think it's a database app. I think
I would disagree. I think I would disagree because even though I don't like to write in Notion,
I mean I do. I mean I have been writing in Notion.
I don't do it myself, but it does accept Markdown, even though it is. I mean, unlike Pages, doesn't really do that, right?
It doesn't, and it does support the classic Markdown keyboard shortcuts, for example. You do Command K, you can insert a link. You can natively, both in the Notion app and in the Notion API, you can import and export content as Markdown. So they do have first-class support for Markdown.
They did just update the API to make that Markdown support even better, just like a week ago. So I think Notion, while maybe it didn't start there because it was a block-based editor, that its support, it is moving closer to what we would consider maybe a more traditional text editor.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I have been using Notion as my text editor. In fact, to prepare for this episode, I checked out after nearly a year, I think 10 months or so, Obsidian again, which I stopped using just before WWDC last year. And I mean, we are, at this point, it's April, and we are just before WWDC. In 2 months, it'll be WWDC. So it's the 1-year anniversary of embracing Notion. I have 70 articles in Notion. Plus my iOS and iPadOS 26 review that I imported this morning in Obsidian. And fun fact, I actually did it with Claude Code. I configured Claude Code with the Obsidian CLI, which we're going to talk about later. And I obviously already have the Notion integration in Claude Code. And I said, look at this database. This is where I've been writing articles in Notion. This is my Obsidian folder with an archive of my articles. I want you to migrate to back up those articles as Markdown from Notion to Obsidian.
Okay.
So this is something that you can do now with text editors.
I'm laughing only because I have 3,300 documents in my Obsidian.
And
that's after archiving a lot of them about a year ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, years ago, I used to have a complete backup of all the articles that I ever wrote.
Yeah.
I should probably ask our web developer to pull an archive of all the articles that you and I have individually on Mac.
I've been meaning to do the same thing, and then to kind of have a way to update it regularly going forward so that we can use that as a database to query stuff a little easier.
Yeah, I only have a subset of those articles in my Obsidian, unfortunately.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Steamclock. You probably have opinions about app quality. You know the difference between an app that feels right and one that just feels off. Steamclock software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They're a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they've been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but don't have the in-house team to build something great. Steamclock works with companies to level up their app so they can go from it's holding us back to it's pulling its weight. Some of their clients have discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way onto the App Store isn't a product strategy. Steamclock has deep experience shipping apps for iOS and Android, so they're good at helping companies figure out the right technical approach for each situation. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they've helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares as much as you do, Steamclock is where to start. Visit steamclock.com/appstories to get in touch. That's steamclock.com/appstories. Our thanks to Steamclock for their support of the show.
But yeah, I checked out Obsidian again after a while, and I have been writing articles in Notion. I have created several actions and scripts in drafts to export articles as Markdown and finish them writing, finish editing them in drafts. So I have been using Notion as a text editor. I don't think I don't think it is ideal as a text editor. Is all I'm saying. Like even support for
I agree.
Footnotes, for example.
Yeah.
There are no footnotes, and you can sort of fake your way around modern Markdown features, like callouts and things by creating custom plugins. It gets very complicated very fast.
Yep.
But yeah, it's possible, and I've been doing that. But I mostly think of Notion as a note-taking app and as a way for me to dump information and organize it into a database rather than a writing environment.
Right. Well, and that's why I've stuck with Obsidian. I mean, the whole time is
you have stuck with Obsidian.
I have because I think at the end of the day, I find writing in Obsidian less distracting because it's very much just plain text that I'm working in, and I never have more than one or two documents showing at one time.
So you only write in Obsidian.
Yes, that's the big change for me. Is at one point
I think that's where I want to land also.
It's much better now. I mean, what I found was that I was doing a lot of the things you were describing in Notion. If I found a link, or if I'm taking notes for something we want to talk to our web developer about, whatever it was. It was just ephemeral stuff. Reference material, all this stuff I would keep in Obsidian. And I know a lot of people do that and do it successfully. It just didn't work for me because as much as I understand and think the linking and all that is a great system for a lot of people, I never was a big linker from like one document to another. I find doing that in Notion more intuitive because it's more visual. I don't find it as easy to do in a plain text editor myself. And that's just kind of me more than anything else. I do keep everything organized by folders. And one of the things that I recently did, because I had so much old but still useful information in Obsidian that was just like what I would call, it's like a Mac Stories knowledge base. It's like, Here are how the shortcuts we use in WordPress work. Here's like all the rates that we charge for advertising. Just information about MacStories as a website and as a business. And what I did is I pointed Claude code using the Obsidian CLI. I pointed it at my database, and I had to go through, because it was pretty well organized into folders. I had to go through topically and go through and synthesize all that, find the important information based on my definition of what I considered important. And then I actually had Opus write summaries of all of that information into Notion with links back to the source material, so that if I need to reference that, I can link back and make sure that it's not inaccurate in some way, not hallucinated or something. But what it did was it condensed, and it took a lot of overlapping notes that were scattered all over the place and brought them together in like a unified whole, where it's a lot more usable for me now in Notion in just a series of pages in a database.
Yeah, I feel like the most important point right here when we consider text editors now is that Obsidian is like, if you mostly care about Markdown and plain text and customization, I feel like Obsidian is sort of having a second life right now.
I agree.
It kind of looked to me like they were maybe risking to become a little irrelevant a few years ago, but I feel like in a funny turn of events, the popularity of desktop AI agents, and I mostly feel like Obsidian is having a second life thanks to the popularity of Claude code, essentially, and how the Obsidian, how the company is embracing that, like this idea of, you have a bunch of folders and Markdown files on your desktop. Well, it turns out that is great input for Claude code, and they are embracing this sort of agent first nature with the Obsidian command line utility. So there's a terminal integration with Obsidian, and these AI agents, they love command line utilities.
They sure do.
Much more so than MCP.
Yeah.
And they also have this new feature called the headless sync, where you can basically sync with your Obsidian sync account, even if the Obsidian app is not open. Which is used to be one of the great disadvantages. Like back in the day, I used to have a Mac Mini server before the M4 Mac Mini, where I would keep the Obsidian window open at all times, just to make sure that it would sync in the background. And it's kind of funny how now I can keep Obsidian closed because they have
to have the terminal open.
But I need to have the terminal open, and I need to have the Claude app open.
Right.
Dispatched. So some things, time is a flat circle.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, I feel like Obsidian is more relevant than ever, because the Markdown support is still excellent.
Yeah.
Like I think it's the best Markdown editor. Like if you just want to have a pure Markdown editor, it's maybe between Obsidian and BBEdit.
Yeah, and it's really good for people who are picky, because it's, as you said, so customizable. It's not just custom.
That's the thing,
right?
Yes.
It's both the appearance and it's the plugin. So, like, one of the things now in the world of AI that we're living in is I'm making my own Obsidian plugins. Nothing fancy, but you know what I do? For instance, I have an Obsidian plugin that takes the document I'm in and puts it in Dropover, which is a little shelf app on the Mac, because then, you know what? It's really easy for me to drag that into the terminal. It's just like a convenience thing. Instead of doing the, open in Finder command, going to the Finder, dropping that in the terminal, it saves a couple of steps. And I've been doing that with a lot of little things where I'm taking the files I'm working on in Markdown and I'm shooting them off somewhere else, because I could also, I haven't done this, but I probably should do a thing where I can export it automatically into Notion straight from Obsidian using a plugin.
You just gave me an idea.
Yeah, I actually now that I think, I don't even know if I might have already done that, and I didn't even remember that I did it. But anyway, you can do that.
Now that I think about it,
oh yeah, I do have it, Federico. I have Send to Notion. Yeah, that does exactly that, and uses this. I think it uses a skill.
Now I was thinking, since you have in Claude Co-work, you have computer use now, right?
Yeah.
So potentially you could create a Claude co-work project that is only about making Obsidian plugins, and you point that project to the Obsidian/plugins folder, and you tell Claude co-work, create a plugin and test it yourself.
And install it. Yeah. I mean, that's
and
what
install it.
that's
and
because,
test it.
that's what I've been doing too with all of these is that, you have your manifest and you have your you have your JavaScript, you have all the different little pieces for your plugin. I just have Claude install it all now.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay. Well, all right. So Notion, Obsidian, let me mention, I feel like there's an entire, I feel like Obsidian is the top choice once again for reasons that are surprisingly new compared to a couple of years ago.
Shifting for sure. Because
yeah.
I think you're right that it got to the point, it was so hot for so long that
it was so hot for so long in the Zettelkasten digital garden
and
community.
all the plugins were kind of like saturated. Like for that kind of knowledge management stuff, all the ideas had kind of worked their way through the system and it kind of plateaued for a while.
Yeah.
But with the advent of agents and chatbots and everything, it's really sort of taken off again.
Yeah, in a different crowd, which is so fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, so beyond that, I want to mention Drafts by Greg Pierce. This is what I've been using for the past year to refine and fine-tune for the last mile of my drafts as article drafts that start in Notion. Then I import them in Drafts, the Drafts app, and that's where I finish them. And it's great because it's very native to Apple platforms. So unlike Obsidian, which has the Electron aftertaste, Drafts is very native. Made by an indie developer. It works everywhere. They have an Apple Watch app. They have an iPad version. Excellent iPad version, I would say. Support for all the latest and greatest features, from the menu bar to keyboard shortcuts, multi-window, all that sort of stuff. Shortcuts actions. They recently revamped all the shortcuts actions. Drafts is also sort of Greg Pierce as the pulse of the community. There's a brand new Drafts MCP server.
Yep.
There is a very new Drafts command line utility. There's a Drafts CLI that you can also use with AI agents. And you can obviously, just like Obsidian, you can make your own Drafts actions using AI. Just give Claude or ChatGPT a link to the Drafts JavaScript documentation and make your own actions.
Yep.
That's what I've been doing. I have actions for Markdown, formatting things like footnotes or image galleries that we use on Mac stories, stuff like that. So I think it's an excellent Markdown text editor. The thing about Drafts that can be a little strange, I think in folders when I'm like in Obsidian, I have my Mac Stories root folder, and that's where I keep the articles that I'm working on.
Yep.
And then I have my archive folder, which is where I put the articles that I've published. And Drafts has views. It doesn't have folders. So you have an inbox, and then you got to move things to the archive. The dream for me would be to have a folder-based version of Drafts instead of a CloudKit-based version of Drafts. But at that point, I guess what I'm asking for, imagine if Drafts could be Obsidian in the sense that it's like living on the file system. Instead, Drafts sort of has its own iCloud database, which is, I think, the biggest difference compared to Obsidian.
Yeah, it really is. And that, I think my hang up when I've had one with Drafts is that I like Drafts a lot, but I really like having access to the file system for all the things we've been talking about in terms of manipulating text. One that I should mention that I know that you don't know about is Panda.
I have no idea what this. I honestly, is it from bear? It's
it
another
is.
animal. Okay.
It is. So this is a shiny frog thing, and it's a beta. This has been a beta for a very long time. It's a beta Mac app that was
beta Mac app.
Yeah,
okay.
And it is. You can only find it in their user forums, and the reason I started using it again recently is that I've been looking for something. I was looking for an app that would be really simple, that would be a very good viewer for Markdown with light editing tools that I could use alongside Claude Code. Because a lot of times when I'm using the Superpowers plugin, it's kind of it's a harness. It's a structure for doing projects in Claude Code. And one of the steps in its multi-process setup is that it creates a spec for whatever it's going to build for you. And you need to look at the spec and make sure that it's correct and that it's what you want to do. And that's generated in Markdown. I have it open in Panda. And Panda is very much the UI that you would see in terms of the Markdown, the kind of rich text looking Markdown style that Bear has built into it. But it's instead of being like Bear, which has its own sidebar and has its file system kind of baked into Bear itself, this is Bear but for text files on your system. So you can open any Markdown file in Panda, and it's a standalone document with some basic editing controls like, the usual formatting type stuff and other things for Markdown. And I've just found that it's been a very nice way of opening up these reports that I get from Claude. Sometimes they have like tables in them and things, and being able to look at that in a really nice, rich text kind of way. And then when I'm done, I just close it. I mean, it's not like I'm editing a lot. I can edit in these things, and I do from time to time, but for the most part, I'm using it as a viewer, and I like it a lot for that. I've been thinking a lot about compartmentalizing my Markdown use in recent weeks because, as we talked about at the beginning, everything in Obsidian was just too much for me. It just didn't work with the way my mind works. So Obsidian is writing, Panda is viewing, and I'm also looking I'm kind of on the fence about kind of a Scratchpad app. And I've tried a lot of them. I've tried like Scratchpad by Sindre Sorhus. I've tried Drafts as that kind of thing. I've tried something called Meteorite, which is written in Go and just not native enough for me. It's like a menu bar app. I've tried a lot of different ones. I may end up trying to build one myself just because I kind of want Bear. I kind of want a Panda, but I want it I want it to be always available through a global hotkey is what I want.
You know what you should check out? I'm going to send you a link. There's this Mac app called Clearly Markdown.
I don't think I've tried that one. No.
It's a very simple app, free to use, no subscription, native Mac OS. And it just lets you open Markdown files. And at the top, you can either switch between plain text view or preview mode. That's it.
Oh, nice. That's very similar to what I'm looking for. I mean, the thing with Panda is that obviously it started, I've used it on and off forever. I actually came back to it because Finn mentioned it to me recently because he used to work at Shiny Frog during college, and he's been using it for a similar reason. The thing with it is though, it started out as their alpha for whatever the next major version of Bear is going to be. They're still working on it, and it's still a beta. And ultimately, I'm not sure whether this is meant to be what Bear will be or whether this will eventually go away at some point. So I don't know that it's a permanent solution, but it is a solution that I've been enjoying so far. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Claude from Anthropic. I've done a lot with Claude these past few months. I've built iOS, iPad, Mac, Vision OS, and web apps. Probably, I think, 2 or 3 native apps, as well as 23, 24 web apps, and a Listen Later podcast app that creates a personal podcast from articles that I want to save. So yeah, I've done a lot with Claude, and what I love about it is that it makes it so easy to do everything from simple scripts to full-on native applications. The thing about it is that Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. And if you're a developer that's spending half of your day on tasks that you wish you could just hand off, Claude Code runs in your terminal, reads your code base, and can take on things like writing tests, refactoring, or debugging without your hand holding it through every step. Claude also creates polished documents. I use it for all sorts of things like README files and guides and that sort of help documentation, but it also can be used with spreadsheets, working with formulas, and presentations directly in your file system, not rough drafts that need heavy editing. Plus, Cowork can spin up multiple Claudes working in parallel, splitting complex tasks across subagents that coordinate with full context. It means you can set long-running tasks and step away while Claude works in the background. This is the kind of thing that I've done a lot for file management, renaming files, getting organized, all sorts of things like that. Are you ready to tackle bigger problems? Get started with Claude today using the URL claude.ai/appstories. That's claude.ai/appstories to check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all the features mentioned in today's episode. claude.ai/appstories. Our thanks to Claude by Anthropic for their support of the show.
Can you tell me again, because I cannot seem to comprehend what it is. Can you tell me again about Zed?
So Zed is a text editor for developers.
Okay, so it's for code.
It's for code, but it's
Okay.
Here's how I would describe it to you. Whereas Obsidian is a writing app that can handle code, Zed is a coding app that can handle writing. And so it's coming at it from the developer side more than from the writer side.
Okay.
And one of the things, but it does a very nice job with just like, general Markdown. And of course, you can put any kind of text-based code in it and develop with it. But it has a sidebar. It's very simple. It has a viewer, and then it has a sidebar. In the sidebar, you can go into the settings and you can connect up like the Claude API, or you can or OpenAI's Codex, and you can connect your existing account to Zed. And so all I've been using it for is one thing, is that I created an Obsidian plugin with the help of Claude that opens up the current Obsidian document in Zed. Then I open the sidebar, I type the @ symbol, because you're like mentioning your document. I mention the existing document, it autofills, so it's very easy to do. And I type proofread. And it does a really nice job with Claude proofreading the document. And you can kind of pick and choose which changes you want to, like typos and things you want to fix, or you can do them all at once. It's just a very nice, quick way to do a quick pass for looking for typos, missing commas, misspellings, that kind of thing. That's what I've been using it for. But that's really it so far. I thought about maybe it would replace Obsidian for me, but I don't think so, because I find that Obsidian's plugin system is much more writing based, and there's more variety there. So I don't really think, and sure, I could do a lot of this in Obsidian. There are plugins for grammar and spelling and all that. But there's something about I was using Claude before for some proofreading stuff in the Claude app, and I don't really like it for that, doing it directly in the Claude app. Doing it in Zed is a little nicer because it's all still just in plain text, and any corrections are in plain text. You don't have to kind of like go back and forth between two apps and export as a whole new Markdown file or something like that. It's all just very simple because it's all operating on the same text file.
Let's see. I want to mention a few more. Runestone by Simon Stowring. It's a pretty good Markdown editor, especially on iOS and iPadOS. I don't think it's that nice on the Mac.
It's Catalyst on the Mac, and it could use. I mean, it'd be nice if it were not Catalyst, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, this is based on the Files Documents browser. Yeah. So if you just wanna have a nice Markdown tool to open and edit Markdown documents in the Files app, I think this is pretty good. I also wanted to mention FS Notes. This is another that I keep seeing recommended on Reddit. It's open source. It's available on the iPhone, iPad, and the Mac. It syncs with iCloud, but it doesn't use CloudKit. It uses iCloud Drive, so you can actually see folders of your documents. And it supports the text bundle format, which I guess we should also mention. Text bundle.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing that was popularized by Ulysses, Remember?
Yeah, I don't like text bundles. Bear uses them too.
Yeah, Bear uses them. Obviously, Ulysses is also still an option.
Yeah, yeah.
Ulysses has been around forever at this point. It's another iCloud-based text editor that sort of hides the plain text markdown from you as much as possible. And over the years, like I used to like that idea, but I feel like in my now that I'm a grown up, I tend to prefer the raw plain text markdown, like
Same.
John Gruber intended, more so than I did in my youngster years.
Which is why I'm surprised I like Panda, but as I said, I'm using it mainly for viewing, not for actually writing.
Yeah. So the text bundle is a format that sort of allows you to bundle documents and image assets together.
Yeah.
I get the idea, but I tend to prefer the portability and simplicity of plain text.
It's effectively what Notion does when it exports too.
Kinda.
Right?
Kinda.
I mean, it's different. I know it's a zip file there, but text bundles is a similar type of idea. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting one. The one that I had been using before for just like this kind of one-off markdown viewing and editing was MarkEdit, which is another open source project that's free. Very good. Another one that I've used before that you can get for fairly inexpensive on the App Store, I think, is Typewriter. Does a nice job with basic Markdown support. Those are both good, simple apps that you can use for this kind of thing. And I know you and I used to, back in the day, both write in IA Writer. Not my favorite anymore, but it does a very nice job integrating with the Files app on iOS and iPadOS. They have kind of gone down this path of this AI path that is very strange to me, where it's like this detecting who wrote what, where you're integrating AI writing with your own writing, and it's just not something that I want or need. So it's just kind of not for me these days.
Yeah, I don't like that whole vibe, personally. I think it's an excellent app. Could go without that part, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a version control where the AI is your collaborator or something, I suppose.
I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it kind of like, obviously I write for Mac stories and I like to write things the old-fashioned way. I don't use AI for writing, but if somebody wants to, I mean, more power to them. I don't want to make them feel bad. I mean, and I feel like it's a feature that's supposed to make you feel bad, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the biggest problem for us is that it's just not necessary because neither one of us is dropping AI written text into our articles.
I'm not copying and pasting from Claude into
Nope.
Markdown. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight in this new wave of text editors, John?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would mention Typeora, which I think continues to be developed and is quite good, but it's very web technology based. I mean, I think it's JavaScript, TypeScript, something like that. And I've tried it on and off over the years, and something about it has never clicked for me. But it's also one of those that does a nice job of looking good, taking your Markdown and making it look elegant. And so that, I mean, if that's kind of your thing, if you like that kind of look, whether it's Ulysses, Bear, or whatever, Typeora is worth checking out too, I think.
Yeah. What is this Atlas thing?
Oh, Atlas. Yeah, Atlas is one I came across recently, and I think it's kind of interesting. It's got a little bit in common with Ulysses, I think, in that it's trying to integrate both Markdown and a canvas. So you can use a canvas to plan out your writing in little blocks of text or images. And then you have a sidebar that can be dedicated to research and citations, along with a list of documents in the other sidebar. And I haven't played with it a lot, but it's quite full-featured, and it looks really nice and is native to the Apple platform. So I think it might be worth checking out for people. It's got a bunch of stuff there that's pretty cool.
Atlas. I like that it's available everywhere. And
Yeah.
also on the iPad.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's to me like one of the things with any kind of text-based document. It really needs to be everywhere. I mean, we've got our things that we do and don't like about each text editor, but it's a big nope for me if it's not everywhere. And I think I would really like more note-taking apps in particular to be on the Apple Watch the way Drafts is, because I do think it is very useful to be able to dictate a quick note on the Apple Watch, with your voice or using Scribble or whatever. And there aren't very many apps that support that for note-taking.
Yeah. So, well, I think I'm gonna have to check out Obsidian again, like to sum it all up. I feel like the landscape has both stayed the same and changed enough that maybe I gotta tell you, I cannot imagine any scenario in which I am not dropping tidbits from my brain into my daily notes in Notion or links from Safari. Like Notion as a place to dump information and to organize information, especially with Notion AI to search for that later.
Yep.
It's pretty great.
Well, and I think that's the key difference is Notion AI, because I think that you and I have tried all sorts of systems over the years that would be like the everything app, the dumping, the dumping ground for things. But the hard part has always been finding it again. And I think with Notion AI, it's a lot better. It's better than just regular search.
Yeah, but I've been feeling the pull of a space just for writing,
Yeah.
And I don't think I actually ever used Obsidian like that. Years ago, when I was really into Obsidian, it was also my note-taking app, and I never really took the time to set it up just as a writing environment. So maybe that's something that I could try this year.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth giving it a shot. That's kind of where I'm heading. I mean, now that I've pulled all the reference information out of Obsidian and put it in Notion, I'm going to leave it there, archived, so that I can get back to it. On the other hand, I'm going to move it more towards a strict writing environment. I'm going to, I think, get rid of a lot of the plugins that I had, strip it down, really concentrate on the actual writing environment, what's in the toolbars, how does it look, and get it to exactly what I want, because it's pretty close to that. But I haven't really taken it from the perspective of this is just a writing app now. It's not a note-taking app anymore. And I think I can kind of streamline it a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right, Federico. Well, in the post-show, we are going to talk today a little bit more about writing. We're going to talk about our writing workflows, which we haven't really done in quite a while. And so we'll be doing that for AppStories Plus subscribers. You can go to Mac Stories and go to the podcast tab to learn more about AppStories Plus. It's the extended version with a post show delivered a day early and in higher bit rate audio and with no ads. So check it out and subscribe if you'd like. And in the meantime, you can find us at macstories.net, and we're on social media. You can find Federico everywhere. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.